I ran over and found that he had been shot in the left calf, or in the left shin. He looked quite bad. I didn't know what to do and stood there in a bit dazed. Then two police dog unit guys pitched up at the scene and gave me my first demonstration of police brutality. A dog handler set his Alsatian on the defenseless, wounded striker, adding a severe mauling to the guy's problems. This left a bitter taste in my mouth, and to this day I felt bad about not stopping it. I justified my lack of integrity by telling myself that I was just a young cop who didn't know any better. Well, I know better now, and there's no excuse for that kind of behavior, and I still feel that way about it. When I got back to the center, the rest of the cops were, I was told that there were 3 dead and 1 wounded. Whoa, what the fuck is going on? Was my thinking. I don't want to be part of this. I could see the bodies lying on the floor. Emotionally, I was in way over my head, and I didn't know how to find my way back. Later that day, I met General Swart to be debriefed on what had happened. The general was in command of the operational units around the country, internally, and on the borders. He was really friendly, and I ended up smoking his whole pack of Camels while being debriefed. He'd taken a liking to me and congratulated me on my courageous actions and for not standing down in the face of attack. I was nervous and certainly wasn't feeling courageous. I approached another officer and asked him what was going to happen to me. He said, you'd probably get a medal. The next day, I was told to lay charges of public violence against the wounded and mauled striker, which, to my shame, I did. I had no idea what finally happened to him. All manner of trouble was brewing on the Witwatersrand. On the 27th of April, 5 non-striking South African Transport Union workers were kidnapped, dragged into Casata House, and sentenced to death by a kangaroo court. They were assaulted, jammed into a car, and driven into the veld south of Johannesburg CBD for execution. One of the 5 managed to scramble out of the vehicle, and he ran for his life. He bumped into a group of South African Defence Force soldiers who were patrolling the area. It was already too late for the other 4. After an extensive search, their bodies were found hacked, stabbed, and with smoking tires around them. Unfortunately, too, the man who escaped was later caught by a mob in Tembisa Township, doused in petrol and burnt to death. The police raided Casata House and arrested 11 men. 1 was the chairman of the People's Court, and 3 were ANC and Umkhonto we Sizwe soldiers. In 1988, 8 were convicted of murder. 4 were sentenced to death, and the others received long prison terms. The 4 death sentences were later commuted to long prison terms. 10 days after the murders on 7 May, Casata House was bombed. The 2 bombs that exploded were said to have been the most powerful ever detonated on the Witwatersrand. 1 security guard was injured, and Casata House was ruined. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission later got to the bottom of the matter. In an amnesty application, Minister Adrian Vlok and the Commissioner of Police, Johan van der Merwe, admitted the bombings were carried out by a security branch of the South African Police to prevent Casata House being used to plan revolutionary activities. I don't know what to say about that. If they're murdering people there, then I suppose they got what they deserved in a way. The railway strike eventually ended on 6 June 1987. Most of the strikers who had been dismissed during the strike were reinstated. Those found guilty of intimidation and violence were not reinstated. Although the unions claimed victory, the workers had lost some 40 million rand in wages and bonuses. They had also received a good drubbing from the South African Police. Something like 136 railway carriages were set on fire and stoned, causing damage amounting to 30 million rand. Radio Freedom announced that the ANC had praised the arson attacks. There was no mention, let alone an apology, for the families of those who had been beaten and murdered by the ANC and Casata mobs. The ANC spokesperson was quoted as saying, "There is no doubt that for us to move forward, we have to include an element of violence in our actions." Yep, What was I doing there? Why was I mixed up in this political shit? I didn't give a damn for that stuff. I was just a peace-loving kid from Nigel trying to get on with life, yet I stayed on. I suppose that reflected of my lack of integrity. Well, I paid for it with 9 years of my life. When we returned to the college, the atmosphere seemed a lot lighter than before. Sergeant Pelser had fallen ill and the junior sergeant, Cater, had taken over from him. Cater was way more lenient and, and things were beginning to look up for us. Before I knew it, training was over and I was posted to the special guard unit where I spent a few months when they transferred me because I couldn't stay awake on guard duty. And that's the truth. Man, I don't know what I was doing in the guard unit. I literally would fall asleep in an hour. There was no radio, reading matter, or entertainment of any kind allowed. It was just too boring for me. Falling asleep on duty is no laughing matter. That's how I found myself standing in front of Captain Rambo Killian, the commanding officer of the riot unit number 6 at Donata, the most notorious riot squad in the country, perhaps the world. I was his latest recruit, fresh meat. Rambo Killian was a big, overwhelming man with red hair and a large, bushy moustache. He had taken a liking to me when I handled the shooting incident during the riot trip from Verdrag. I was sent to the armory and issued with a Beretta 9mm parabellum pistol and 2 magazines, each holding 15 rounds. I got a riot helmet, gas mask, Beretta 202 pump-action shotgun, and 25 cartridges of number 5 birdshot, and 2 tear gas grenades. My future worried me, to say the least. I had good reason to be worried. By then, Marina and I were married and were expecting our first child. I was thinking of the 200 policemen killed on duty in the last year, a large number of whom had met their end in the townships on the East Rand. When I met the guys in the unit, I could immediately see they were all hard-working, hard-drinking, hard asses. I thought I'd never fit in with this lot, mainly because I wasn't much of a drinker. Members of the unit had their ways of treating new guys, and I wasn't going to get off lightly, being English-speaking and all that. Many of the Afrikaners were pretty intolerant of English-speaking people. That Friday night, I went to a Joel at Bravo Barracks, which looked like something out of a science fiction movie. It was part of an old mine compound that was away from the main base. The command structure had given up trying to sort out the dwellers as lost causes. I could immediately see why. Some crazy dude called Blackie Swart was standing under a tree shooting birds with his shotgun. I looked at him in disbelief. So he thought he should explain his actions. They're fucking shitting on my car. So what's the fucking big deal? The drinking began. There was a ton of beer in quart bottles straight from the local shebeen. The party had trouble written all over it. These guys clearly didn't care much for consequences. The gunfire went on all night, and we all got hammered by booze. I was having a good time until Krykrokum, an old riot unit veteran with a death stare, came over, pointed his 9mm at me, and called me a fucking soapkill. I grabbed his pistol from his hand and threw it into the bushes and warned him to stay away from me. He immediately backed off in shock or in disbelief. I again realized that in this place, to get respect, you need to hold your ground. After that, Cry and I became really good friends. After learning more about him, I discovered that he was a really, really good guy. The party got worse and the drink never stopped flowing. There was such an abundance of beer that if your quart lost its chill, you'd simply throw it against the wall and fetch a colder one. I got shit-faced and so did everyone else. By 11 o'clock, it was fall down time. This kind of Joel turned out to be the way of life among riot unit members. I dragged myself into the scene without too much persuasion. It's a slippery slope down to the pits of hell. That's it for that chapter. The next chapter is called Preparing for the Task Ahead. So I hope you enjoyed that chapter. It was really rather mundane for what's to come in the book. So let's get on to that. in the next few videos.